City Clerk, can you hear me?
I can.
Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Anybody have trouble getting on with the system? No? Okay, good. We're trying out the webinar format, which is not drastically different, but has a few different features. Our hope is that it will allow us to have maybe a little bit more fluid meetings. We'll see. I await everyone's feedback. I don't know if everybody is here yet. I was expecting to see Darren, but he might be on one of the city manager office profiles. Maybe he's coming in later after the first one.
He's in as an attendee right now.
Okay.
Mayor.
Well, thank you, City Clerk. I appreciate that. Just looking across the screen. So if everybody's here, I think we better get started. And the first item for the work session is, I think, I had it pulled up here.
It's public comments.
Yeah, public comments. Thank you, Vice Mayor. So let's open it up for any public comments that we might have waiting.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah,
it might be helpful since we're using a new format just to let the public know to raise their hand.
thank you very much, Councilor Somerville. That's absolutely right. So if you are attending our meeting and you're in the waiting room and you'd like to make public comment, you raise your hand there. I think there's a little bar down where you click on raise your hand on the Zoom program, and then we'll have the city clerk will let you know that you can unmute yourself and then make a public comment to the council. City clerk.
Oh, just a note, if they're on their phone, they can hit *9 and it'll raise their hand for them.
Thank you very much. And Councilor O'Doherty, were you going to add something there?
Can we take advantage of the Q&A?
We haven't discussed using that yet. I think it would be a good idea, but since right now we're...
I mean, just to ask to speak.
The council members?
Well, if the public wants to speak, maybe they could put a note in the Q&A.
Yeah,
Would that work?
Yeah, that's fine. I don't know if they are able to use it on their end, but if they can, then that's great.
It has been disabled for right now until we are able to have that a conversation with the city attorney. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay then. Do we have anybody, city clerk, that's wanting to make public comment?
I have not received notice ahead of time, Mayor.
All right. And
I see no hands raised.
Okay. So if everybody's ready, why don't we just go and start the work session, since there isn't anybody there, or nobody that wants to speak right now anyway. So then that's going to be our item number 3, the UDC parking lot requirement review. We've got a number of staff people listed for the introduction on that. So whoever is first up to bat, it's your show. You have the floor.
Mayor, Council, I think I'm going to primarily be running through this with you. I have actually, it's a fairly short presentation on this topic. There's not a whole lot to really get into in terms of the code requirements related to it. So what I will do is I will have the clerk start the presentation and have her advance slides as needed. And I'll start going through the presentation. So, Nancy, if you would like to go to slide 2, we can just start there, and that would be fine. There we go. Okay. So the topic of the work session this evening, based on the direction that I was given, is related to parking lots, and specifically non-conforming parking lots when we require improvements to be done on those parking lots when changes occur. And so what I felt was important was to provide, first off, some background. Prior to 2010, basically there were no requirements. You, as a property owner, if you had a parking lot that was built at some time, whether it was with a building or some use or something like that, or maybe you just paved space on your lot, you could pretty much do whatever you wanted. You could change parking space alignments. You could change where the access point was. You could repave it. You could add landscaping in. You could remove landscaping. There's basically no controls. The only time something occurred prior to 2010 related to a parking lot was at the initial stage of development. So if someone wanted to build a building, they would be required to maybe put in parking spaces that met our standards, not create safety issues. And then, but at the time, there were really no parking lot requirements. You didn't have to put islands in, no landscaping, things like that. In 2010 is when the development code was adopted, and the development code was geared towards making requirements for certain things, and parking lots was one of those. And why was that the case? At the time, we not only had the comprehensive plan that really guided us in terms of stating that our community desired higher quality development, and that included higher quality development in commercial areas that looked better. And one of those things was, how do we improve sites? Landscaping is one of those components. And so in 2010, when the development code was being worked through, this was highly talked about at council. I don't know who all remembers and who all was here, but there was discussion around what requirements do we place on parking lots, what requirements do we place on sites when it came to landscaping. And council ultimately ended up adopting a requirement that was fairly strict. The requirement at the time in 2010 was that if anyone reconstructed a parking lot that already existed, full compliance was required. What does full compliance mean? Landscaping around the perimeter of the site, curbs and gutters and sidewalks, islands within the site, proper space width, all ADA requirements being met. A fairly extensive amount of work would be required, no matter if you were just fixing a little corner of your parking lot or the whole thing. What we found was it aligned generally with the planning documents that we had and provided that general direction of, yes, this is better. But staff, after using that code for about 4 years, brought forward to council amendments because we were finding it extremely problematic. What we found at the time is that on smaller projects, the full compliance was creating many difficulties that would probably either require variances or people simply just weren't doing the work. And what we brought forward in 2014 were amendments that provided what I call percentage thresholds. So instead of just full compliance as the only option, parking lots that are redone now fall into a set of categories that allow us flexibility and allows us some kind of stair-stepped approach to the requirements that are going to be ultimately required for the parking lot. And so, Nancy, if you want to go to the next slide. So with that being in mind and the new codes being adopted in 2014 and the percentages being created, that's where we are today. So those have been in place for over 6 years now. And what I'm going to do is kind of run through what is allowed, what isn't, so that you understand where we stand today. And then I'll kind of go into, just at the end of my talk, just thoughts, kind of observations on the use of this. So first off, if you have a parking lot with less than 10 spaces, you're exempt. You can repave your parking lot every week if you want to and not trigger anything. We don't care. It's small enough. Even the addition of landscaping is really not going to do a whole lot. A lot of times you can't, so we exempted it. You're allowed to resurface over your existing pavement. You can do that as much as you want. You just got to paint the spaces back so that they're conforming spaces. You can reseal and seal your parking lot as much as you want. You're exempt from all the provisions of bringing in landscaping, updating the site at all. You can restripe your site. You can restripe your site as many times as you want, as long as you are not changing accesses and drive aisles. And one thing you'll note is that almost in all cases, unless you already have conforming ADA parking spaces, you're required to bring your parking lot up to ADA requirements if you modify your parking lot and modify the spaces. So something that we can't get around, that's a federal law, not local, but we still have to comply with that. Nancy, if you want to go to the next slide for me. So now really, when does something actually occur? When do you actually have to do something? So another exemption, if you're modifying less than 25% of your parking lot, you're exempt. You still don't have to do anything. If you are modifying, and I'm going to jump back to this, the term is reconstruction in code. This is the key term. If you're reconstructing 25 to 50% of your parking lot, you have to provide landscaping along the right-of-way. So any street side of the property. If you're modifying 50 to 75% of the landscaping, you have to provide, or the parking lot, you have to provide landscaping on all the sides of the parking lot. That would include also a street frontage if there was one. More than 75% requires full compliance. That's where you're going to be putting in landscaping around the perimeters, landscaping on the street side, making sure your drive-throughs have proper stacking distances, internal landscaping islands, proper painting, proper ADA spaces, everything. So what does reconstruction mean? Reconstruction means removal of the asphalt and base to replace drainage facilities that are necessary for the removal of the asphalt or base. Basically what this means is if you remove all the asphalt, you're modifying the asphalt and the base and you're triggering the requirements. If you just mill, is what the common term is, where you just take off a portion of the asphalt and then put new asphalt down, you don't trigger anything still. You're exempt. So if you fall into one of these categories here is how we apply the requirements of parking lots and non-conforming parking lots specifically. We also, though, have a couple other options to provide. In code, we have already built in that if the improvements that would be required for instance, let's say you're replacing 50 to 75% of your parking lot, and the landscaping on all sides of the parking area mean that you're going to lose 20% of your parking spaces, we can provide you administrative relief through staff and work with you to come up with an option so that you can keep most of your parking and still try to meet the intent of code. Also, you can always request a variance. There are unique scenarios that sometimes don't fall into these categories that we see here, and so a variance is also an option that someone could consider. What's interesting though is that most parking lot work that we see within our office is mostly associated with new development or existing development that's expanding. It's when they're adding on to parking lots, changing their use, doing things like that. We really don't have a whole lot of people who are reconstructing their parking lots. And so if we want to go to the next slide, I've provided just a brief breakdown of kind of how we've used this code since 2014. We had 18 sites in total use this section of code. First off, 8 of those sites were University of Wyoming parking lots. In only one instance at the university did they have to do fairly significant changes because they had a very non-conforming parking lot. All the rest of their parking lots, for the most part, met almost all the requirements of our code, so there was really no issue. In one instance, we had someone go through the process, but they ended up just not doing the work. They just didn't move forward with the project. We had 2 sites that were non-conforming that were simply just exempted. They didn't meet the thresholds for the requirements that we see here. We've had a parking lot request a variance to do what they wanted to do. We've had 3 sites require changes such as islands and landscaping. So I would say fairly significant changes to the site. And then we've also had some sites 3 sites require minor changes, such as added landscaping along, for instance, like the right-of-way. Nancy, I think we're off on slides now. There. One more, I think. There we go. That's the one. So what are we seeing from our office? First off, most sites really aren't having an issue with this section of code. We are not finding that we're just not dealing with it very often, to be honest. We're also finding that most owners are not reconstructing their parking lot. Mill and overlay is a very common practice where they just need to remove some of the asphalt, put new asphalt down. It does the job. It makes their parking lot look nice, fixes issues, things like that. The other thing, and I mentioned this before, is really most of the parking lot changes we're seeing is when there's other work being done, such as additions or major changes on the site. And so there are a lot of times they're having to add parking. They're maybe having to build the building in their existing parking lot and move the parking lot to a whole nother location, modifying driveways, things like that. And so that's where we're seeing that happen, definitely when sites are doing work on their site. And all the triggers related to those things are found in a whole different section of code. They're not even related to the parking. They're related to more the use and the changes on the property. And so if we want to go to the next slide, Nancy. So when are we seeing major issues arise? First off, when contractors are not pulling the proper permits. Usually the number one issue I run into is when contractors simply tell some property owner they can go repave their parking lot and they don't have to do anything, and we find out. What that means is that a property owner has to retroactively fix the problem, and that is usually costly. The other one we find is when properties owners have major deferred maintenance. This is when they simply are not maintaining their parking lot, they're not crack sealing, they're not oiling the parking lot. They're allowing maybe, for instance, too heavy equipment on it. All those things that what we're finding is that creates a lot of problems. And so once a parking lot gets so far down the road of deferred maintenance, you simply just can't fix it. It's just too hard to fix it under one of those exempt statuses. The other thing we find is property owners, especially the owners who have done development pre-2010, allowing their landscaping and other things that could keep them in compliance, just like letting it die. And so they come in and want to do a new parking lot, but their site no longer conforms to what was approved. Lastly, we find that really old parking lots, so parking lots that are 40 to 60-year-olds, are simply parking lots at the end of their life, and they often need to be reconstructed. And so they fall into usually one of those categories of requiring to be brought up into some standard. And so really what we're finding is that based on what we're seeing, one, we don't use this section of code very often. When we do use this section of code, yes, sometimes it does put requirements onto property owners when they want to redo their parking lot. But what I would say is that we're finding that it is improving the site. It's improving the looks of the property. It's meeting the objectives and goals of not only our comp plan, but now today, our economic development plan. And if you remember only a few years ago, our retail coach talking about some of our major corridors being essentially unsightly because of some of the looks that we have within our community that detracts from economic development and investment in our community. And so really what I guess what I would say, and based on kind of what I've observed in using this code, is that I think this works very well. The tiered system provides me the ability to kind of tier in the improvements and the requirements as we have someone doing a project. And from there, really, I would say if we're thinking about modifying, I really don't think I would recommend modifying this code at this time, and think that the current percentages are working well. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, but that's really all I had to present and go over on this topic.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. Little cleanup for the sake of the meeting. I do see people wanting to take advantage of the Q&A box. We're going to ask right now that folks reserve those questions and ask them in a way that can be recorded and preserved for the public record. So when we turn it over to public comment, ask your questions in that format, please. Opening it up to the council for questions on the presentation and informations in the slides. And I've got Councilor Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Derek, have we seen a drop off in development since 2010, or I think maybe more specifically 2014, that would warrant any sort of modification that would sort of illustrate the fact that the parking is a problem?
Mayor and council, I guess, drop off in terms of all development or just parking, like someone modifying their parking lot?
Yeah, more specifically, I guess, finer point on the question. Have you noticed that this parking lot requirement in the UDC code is problematic and preventing development since 2014?
Mayor, council, no, I don't think it is. Most people that we're seeing large, if they're doing a remodel or something like that, they're adding parking anyway. They have to. And so they're doing these modifications anyways. Like I said, I ran through, we had 18 since 2014. And of those 18, 8 of them were University of Wyoming projects because they did a huge parking lot project across the whole campus. So you take 8 away, we've had 10 since 2014 in the general public. Just, 2 a year, it's just very minimal use. We're just not seeing it.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
You bet. Councilor Schuster, I have you next.
Thank you. Question I have is on our right-of-ways with the state of Wyoming, have we had any problems with some of our rules conflicting with some of their rules? I heard something on that, and I just wanted to see if you'd heard anything on it either.
Yeah, mayor and council. So what'll happen is if we have a property that's, for instance, on like Third Street, Grand Avenue, Snowy Range Road, you can have situations where, for instance, like our landscaping requirements might not be allowed by YDOT because they may be within site triangles, they may be within their right of way. There's a lot of scenarios that can come into play, but in those cases, you've got couple options. One, you could ask for a variance, but two, if the site can comply or has an alternative for compliance, that's usually what most people do. Usually YDOT doesn't fully restrict it, but they may curtail maybe what we're trying to do.
Okay. More questions for Mr. Teeny? All right. Questions from public? Members of the public? I know we have received a couple of eager questions in the Q&A. City Clerk, do we have anyone that is raising their hand in the gallery that would like to speak?
Mr. Mayor, Brett Glass.
All right, Mr. Glass, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if I can be seen. Hopefully I can be heard. My question is, what is the purpose of applying new and potentially onerous requirements when the owner is doing more extensive and hence more expensive resurfacing on a parking lot than if he or she is doing less, and thus is already likely to be more strapped for cash? And will this discourage renovation of badly deteriorated lots, such as the famous case of the one at the flea market on Skyline? Will it discourage newer growing businesses from buying a distressed property, improving it, and setting up shop in Laramie, thus violating Council's goal of economic development and diversification?
Mr. Teeny, do you want to take a crack at that?
Mayor and council. So here's what I would say to that is the council, through your economic development plan and consulting with the retail coach, have all it's clear we have distressed properties in our community. When are we going to require those investments? The council, through the adoption of these requirements, have put those thresholds in place, and it said pre-2010 we weren't seeing the investment put in, and so council has adopted regulations that allows for these conditions and these scenarios to play out and force requirements onto property owners. And I'd say that the other thing to that is property owners who are taking care of their properties and investing in their property and the upkeep and deferred maintenance and things, they're not having to trigger these requirements. Maybe after 60 years, maybe after 40 years, but is in 40 years, is that the okay time, I think, to allow for some of these improvements to come up to some sort of other standard of code? I think so. That's the direction we've been given in our planning documents as well. And, we do this in a lot of other realms. We do this within our building code. You go in and you have a really old house and you need to do upgrades. You're probably going to have to do upgrades on your site. Same with building development standards. So this is for development standards that this council adopts. So things like landscaping, building design, same thing. A property that's 60 years old may have to invest some additional funds into their property to meet those requirements that we require in upgrades when they do certain improvements on their site. And so I think I think that's obvious. That's the direction that we've been given from council and from our processes, and so I think that's where we do stand. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Teeny. Appreciate that. Councilor O'Doherty, I say had a hand.
Yeah, I just want to point out that we're not recommending any new changes. This was just an update, so I didn't know if that was clear to the public.
Yeah, that's an important point. I know that there are some related topics that are close to. Mr. Cheney, I have a little bit of a follow-up question based on your answer there, but I want to give everybody else on council once around again, see if they've had a question come up since the last time I checked with them. Councilor Stalder, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but it seems like a really low number of people redoing their parking lots, 2 a year for 10 years. And we do have a lot of distressed properties in town. I wonder if there's not some misinformation or a perception that if you do redo your parking lot, you're going to be subjected to, having to install or put in all this landscaping and stuff that's discouraging businesses. It doesn't seem like that's the case for the people that apply based on the numbers, but the numbers seem really low for Laramie. So when we're thinking about, we do have distressed properties, is there a way we could incentivize them and say, yeah, you got to do the ADA, that's non-negotiable, but maybe not the landscaping? Is there any carrot that the city could offer to those properties?
Mayor and council, I think obviously getting more information out there to the public is always helpful. You have people that will contact our office to ask questions, and we do a lot of rumor squashing within the planning division, and it's tough. And I think I always say I would encourage anyone that's on, give us a call and we can walk you through and at least let you know what would be required under the requirements. The other thing too is, in the numbers that I gave you, remember a lot of people do the mill and overlays that don't even fall into the numbers that I'm showing you, because they're not triggering any requirements. They're fully exempt. And so people, I think, are redoing their parking lots in those fashions pretty regularly. We see that. But also too, I think you do see some people maybe not just simply doing anything, but a phone call is an easy way to do it. We could also probably put information out on different topics. It's always that balance of overloading the news, the public sector in terms of different ideas and thoughts that are coming out so that people understand what's going on, because sometimes someone might not have a parking lot, so it might not really pertain to them.
Thank you. Other questions? Mr. Teeny, when the shopping plaza on North 3rd had its parking lot, I think, undergo a mill and overlay fairly recently, is that an example of where someone just went in and did the mill and overlay, and they didn't necessarily need to reconfigure the parking lot, but they were able to go ahead and resurface and repair it and spiff it up to the extent that those things last here in Laramie, Wyoming? Would that be an example of where an existing parking lot was able to have that kind of maintenance taken care of, but it didn't trigger some of the things that a reconfiguration would have? Is that a good example, or is an accurate example at least?
Mayor, council, yeah, that would be a good example. That's pretty much what was done. They milled a little bit and then they overlaid on that parking lot. They repainted the spaces just as they were originally. On the southern end, kind of near, I'm just going to say near the Safeway component of it, you'll see some landscape islands that are included in that area. And that was triggered on due to the gas station being installed at the front there of the site. So there's a little bit of kind of gray area in terms of maybe where some boundaries are, but all that stuff to the north when it was resurfaced was fully under that process. So. Yeah,
I appreciate that. And the reason I asked that question was just to maybe provide a concrete example of this. And I wonder sometimes too, yeah, pun intended, I see some of you got it. But the other reason I ask this is that, the council, our economic development partners, the planning office, potential business and current business people in Laramie, the desire, I think, is to have codes that are up to date and that keep pace with industry standards and changes, but not to go overboard on it and then discourage redevelopment. I think I've probably harped on that too much over the years, but you want to have things in place that will allow somebody to come in. So let's say there was a business, and they opened up in an old vacant building. And the parking lot had not been redone. It was an old retail business. They're going to open up another retail business. They can, under what you've outlined for us and provided for us in this information tonight, they would be able to resurface if they wanted to keep things as they were, and simply just open a new retail outlet in that same space. They could just go ahead and mill, overlay, resurface, repaint the lines, and open up. Is that right?
Mayor, council, yes.
All right. I'm sorry for restatements of things, but I just think sometimes it helps us just get that clarity. Anybody else on this topic? It's a great chance to dig into parking. No? Councilor Gabriel has joined us just in time to ask any pressing questions he might have about commercial parking lots and resurfacing and restriping. If he has any. Picking on you, Councilor Gabriel, you don't have to. If you have one, though, by all means.
Well, I'm sure it's been brought up, but I just had concerns concerning some of the capacity. It seems like everything has been cut in half, like motels, for instance, 0.5 per occupant. Has that been addressed?
Go ahead, Mr. Cheney, if you're tracking with the councilor's question. I think I am.
Mayor, council, I think that's related to our parking numbers, which is, I think, a discussion for tomorrow evening.
There we go.
Where I will join you again.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
That's all I had, Mayor. Thank you.
You bet. And thank you, Councilor Gabriel. It's all in the same neighborhood, but we want to try to not get off onto the other track there. I appreciate this update. I appreciate this information. I share everyone's thoughts about how do we get information out to people that want it without dumping information out all the time in a way where it's no longer useful. I'm not sure there is an elegant solution to that, but it's something we can keep talking about and thinking about. Is there anybody, City Clerk, is there anybody else from the public that wanted to ask another question here before we close this one out and move on? Because now would be a good time for them to let us know they want to do that, and they can come in and ask a question or another question if they'd like.
Mayor, I see no hands raised in the attendees.
All right. Other questions about this topic could be written to members of the planning staff, or concerns and questions could be written to the city council as well. So I think we can close. Mr. Tini?
Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, one thing I was going to add just very briefly is one of the things the planning office has been working with is we've been working with the LCBA and what they call the CDLC, which is a portion of the LCBA that works on community development initiatives. And one of the things that we worked on over the last, it's been about a year since we had finished it up, but it's been used for over a year now, is we kind of have a reciprocal process to try to take anyone that contacts our office with questions about development and kind of push them to LCBA for backfilling in terms of engineering and understanding of codes and requirements and resources that our community has to offer. And the same for LCBA. LCBA often gets people first time they come in the door and they say, I want to do some project. And they send them to our office to try to help them understand and fill in, what are the code requirements? What are the processes that are involved? And that kind of reciprocal arrangement that we've created, it's intentional to try to make sure that we're getting as much information that we can to the public as quickly as we can before decisions are being made is really the key. And we feel like it's working fairly well as long as people are reaching out to us. And so just something I thought I would add kind of in relationship to Councilor Stalder's question of like, how are we trying to do this? And that was definitely something that, it's been an intentional process to do that. And it's worked really successfully in a few times that we've got to use it in more complex projects. Sometimes it doesn't do a whole lot, but it's helpful still. So.
No, I think that was a beneficial aside. That seems like a natural way for questions about redevelopment to businesses or maybe possible new businesses. I'd give Councilor Stalder an opportunity to add anything to that, or if she doesn't want to, I get it. All right. Let's go ahead and move on then to the next part of our work session. And thank you very much for the presentation and the updates. So the next work session item, folks, is the Level 2 Dowland Fish Bypass, and we've got staff members on that. I think it's Mr. Parkin, our natural resources specialist, that's going to speak with us on this issue. I don't know if there's anything else. Yep.
Mr. Mayor,
I see the city manager.
Yeah, she would like to introduce this item.
Sure. That's why I was trying to slow roll that out and give anybody else a chance to let us know they wanted to speak first. City Manager Jordan, please. You go right ahead.
I'm wondering if we're having some technical difficulties tonight.
We'll give it a second. We'll give it a second. We see that the hand is up, and I heard her starting to speak a second ago. So.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you, Council. Apologies for that. I wanted to introduce. No. Yes,
I
wanted to.
No apology needed is all.
Okay, thank you. Wanted to take the opportunity to introduce our Natural Resources Manager, Darren Parkin, and let you know that he's going to talk to you tonight about a pretty, I think, exciting project. Darren jokes with me about his he comes in my office, he says, well, I have another sort of harebrained idea, but what I find is his ideas are never at all harebrained. They're really exciting. So I'm gonna let Darren present this project to you. I'll let you know, though, it will require some fairly quick action by the council if you support this project. We were able to get in front of you tonight with a work session because we had a hole in your schedule, fortunately. We will likely be back within just a few weeks with a resolution seeking your support to submit a grant application to help fund this project. It will also require you to be comfortable with using $1,000 of current budget that we have in place to apply for this Water Development Commission Level 2 study. Assuming that study goes well, then we'd be looking at a Level 3 construction project potentially in coming months. But in the short term, we'll need to take some quick action to apply for the Level 2 study. In any case, this is pretty exciting. I'll let Darren talk to you about it. It will deal with the Monolith Ranch, our Dowland headgate, and also potentially have some great improvement to fish habitat and upstream movement. So Darren, it's all yours. Thank you.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to see you all. I'm also going to be doing this presentation tonight in partnership with Christina Barano with Wyoming Game and Fish and Justin Terfair with WWC Engineering. So we do have a presentation for you tonight. So City Clerk would like to start that anytime.
Welcome, Justin and Christina, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to start right at the beginning. This is the Monolith Ranch. I think most of you are very familiar with it. Some of you may not be. And I always, when I give these talks, would like to extend an invitation Anybody that wants to talk ranch, get a hold of me anytime. Anybody ever wants to take a tour of the ranch, get a hold of me anytime. I would be happy to accommodate those requests. But this is the Monolith Ranch. Some of you have seen this slide before. This is about 11,000 acres of contiguous property south of town that the city purchased in 1981 for the water rights. This really represents a major source of future municipal water for the city of Laramie. So next slide, please. The part of the ranch that is kind of the heart of the ranch, so to speak, is this part. This is what is irrigated by the Dowlin water right, which is diverted from the Laramie River. The total flow is 36 CFS. The city has 20 CFS of that water right. About 1,407 acres is owned by the city. We irrigate, we try to put water on every single inch of that 1,407 acres. That's part of our consumptive use plan, and it will help maximize our municipal transfer someday. So next slide, please. So this is the actual ditch itself. You can see the water flowing off to the city property through our measuring flume. You can see the breakdown of the water right on the left there. The city does not own the entire water right. The Bath Ranch has a portion of it, and the McKenzie Ranch has a portion of it. However, the city is the majority owner. One thing to note there in red, priority number 1, 1868. This is the number 1 priority water right in the entire Laramie River system. This ditch was dug in 1868, the year that Laramie itself came into existence, and it's been in the same place running water ever since then. What makes this water so valuable to the city is that the Laramie River is a over-appropriated system that is almost always regulated on an annual basis. And what that means is junior water rights are regulated off to the benefit of senior users. And that's under the prior appropriation doctrine, which most Western states follow. First in time is first in right. So essentially, everybody else on the system will be regulated off in times of short water supply, and we are going to be able to continue to divert, which makes this very valuable as municipal water. Next slide, please. So this, some of you have seen this slide before, the municipal transfer that's going to happen someday. We're probably at least 20 years away. It might be further out than that. And there's several factors of when this water will be transferred from agricultural to municipal use. Obviously, city growth and the demand on the system, continued reliability of the city well fields. If we were to lose a well field or have something adverse happen to the Casper Aquifer, this transfer would certainly be moved up on the priority list. Results of future groundwater development. We may want to develop another well field someday before we transfer this surface water into municipal use. And of course, the longevity of our current water treatment plant and its ability to keep treating water and delivering it into town. In the meantime, we're always working on improved data collection, water measurement, and our consumptive use plan, which basically we're trying to maximize the amount of water that we use, which will allow us to maximize the amount of water we can transfer to municipal use. Now, some of you have heard all this before. I don't want to dive in it too deep. That's a talk in and of itself. But I just kind of wanted to do a quick refresher here before we went into the rest of this, why we're really here today. And the goal, ultimately, if everything comes together just perfect, we'd love to be able to provide enough water for 7,200 future Laramie residents or homes with this transfer. So it's a significant investment by the city, and it is an incredible thing to have in our portfolio, and is definitely going to help the future growth and development of the city. Next slide, please. So specifically tonight, we are talking about the diversion structure, the diversion dam that diverts water out of the Laramie River into the ditch. All of our irrigation that will be transferred to municipal use someday is diverted out of the river from this structure. This is the Laramie River, and it basically shows how this structure goes completely across the river, and it does act as a fish block. Next slide, please. Now this picture here might show a little bit better the drop. This old metal structure with expanded steel walkway. To operate this, you have to walk out onto this catwalk, manually operate those slide gates with those wheels. It's pretty difficult to do when the river's high, and there's a lot of pressure on those things. You can also see the drop off the concrete that those are sitting on. It doesn't seem like much in this picture, but I would estimate that drop is at least 3 feet, maybe 4 feet. And really, low flows, high flows, there's just no way for fish to get through this. So it does represent kind of a total blockage. You'll see along the edge there of this diversion dam structure some sheet piling and this riprap that was done by the city in the early 2000s to kind of shore this dam up. It was getting ready to fail. And in the background there where the vehicles are parked, you can see that 2 head gates, and that structure is where the ditch begins. And that's where this diversion dam backs water up and to push water out into that ditch. So next slide, please. So kind of the impetus for all this was a level 1 WWDC study that was done on the Laramie watersheds back in 2016. I know Laramie Rivers Conservation District had a hand in this as well. And they went through and they looked at a whole myriad of things on the Little Laramie River and the Big Laramie River. And this really identified potential projects that would, then you can slot them in to move on to a level 2 WWDC study. So the graphic there on the left for the Big Laramie River shows the red triangles show where the blockages are on the Laramie River. And the blockage that is closest to the city of Laramie there to the southwest is our Dallin Diversion Dam structure. The one a little bit further upstream, further down to the southwest, that would be the Pioneer Canal. So reading verbatim from the wording of this study, the Dallin Diversion Dam was defined as a complete barrier, which means most or all fish cannot pass upstream during most or all flows. And the Wyoming Game and Fish Department ranked it as one of 2 structures in the watershed of highest concern. And they said that they would prefer that remediation, removal, or replacement would be desirable. So us and the Pioneer Canal got that dubious distinction of being major fish blocks on the river corridor. And a picture of the structure as it looks right now, iced up in the wintertime. So next slide, please. And kind of an aside that I thought I would throw in here, I do have safety concerns with the operation of this. This is during high water in 2014. We have to, city staff has to get out here on this thing and operate these gates. Obviously been doing it for many, many years. We've never had an incident, but it is quite a hair-raising thing at certain times. One, if you look at the left, you can see some trees, logs that have come down into the river. Some of those have been cut and cut out of there, but you know, we have to hang off of that with chains and ropes. Sometimes we have to bring in heavy equipment, backhoes, pickups, four-wheelers, depending on the river flows. When those logs come down in the river during high flows, they stick on this thing. They start to overtop the structure around the edges, which you see on the picture to the right, which ultimately could cause failure of the entire structure. And it's just a real touch and go situation during peak flows. Now, this was a fairly extreme year. 2014 was a very high flow year, but every year, even an average water year, we have some hair-raising moments out there trying to take care of this structure. So next slide, please. And so I thought I would mention before I turn this over to Christina, this is the actual twin head gates that feed water into the Dallin ditch. The head gate on the left, the eastern head gate, is Bath Ranch head gate. The one on the right is where the city water is diverted through. But this structure is old and it's failing. You can't really see it in this picture, but these concrete wing walls have holes in them. The sheet piling leaks. We've tried various different stopgap measures over the years to try to seal those up as best as we can. But in short, this whole structure is failing, and it does not allow us to separate the water like we need to, which is a real detriment to us, especially late in the years during lower flows when we're trying to keep water to our alfalfa and the center pivot, which is really kind of the crown jewel of our consumptive use plan. So this structure, it needs replaced. So in the capital improvement budget, there's $50,000 coming in to replace this structure in fiscal year 22. So I just thought I would call that attention to this. We'll talk more about the finances of this at the end of the presentation, but there is that money, and if we're able to do something here with this level 2, potentially level 3 project with water development and partnering with Game and Fish and other partners, we might not have to do this because this head gate structure could potentially be moved up onto the diversion dam itself and improved. And we've already got money that we are allocating to spend out here, and maybe we could spend it on something better than just replacing the head gates themselves. So with that, I think it is now Christina Barano's turn, or do I have one more? I'll take the next slide. I apologize. The next slide is mine as well. So again, the idea here is this is an opportunity to bring in various different funding partners. Initial conversations have been extremely positive. There are a lot of groups that are interested in this. There are a lot of groups that have an interest in improving the fish habitat conditions on the Laramie River. And of course, for us, the city has a major goal of maintaining the reliable irrigation delivery, because the number one idea is we have to be able to divert that irrigation water in order to meet our consumptive use demands and to be able to irrigate with that water and ultimately transfer that water to municipal use someday. So we don't want to impair our ability to deliver irrigation water with any projects. And again, modernize diversion and improve operator safety as per the slides. I'd really like to, as part of this project, come up with a design to where human beings, personnel, do not have to actually get out on the thing in high water and crawl around on the structure, and reduce maybe some of that maintenance that we have to do, especially when we have trees and in those emergency situations that always seem to happen on a weekend during high water. And of course, improve fish passage, which will help everybody, the community and the public fishing area that's right downstream of here, help the habitat upstream, and really bring in those partners. So with that, I think I will turn this over to Christina.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, as Darren mentioned, my name is Christina Barano, and I'm the Regional Aquatic Habitat Biologist for the Game and Fish Department. And I've been involved in fish passage projects throughout Southeast Wyoming, and bringing partners together and trying to build funding and support for these types of projects. And I think Darren is well aware that the Game and Fish has been very interested in creating fish passage at the city's Dowland diversion for many, many years. I just wanted to give you an introduction of some of the fish that can be found within the Laramie River and where we'd focus our fish passage. Number one, it's a wild brown trout fishery. So that's one of the species that we would focus on. But it also is a host for some other native non-game fish within the river, such as brassy minnow, common shiner, and Iowa darter. And all three of these species are what Wyoming considers species of greatest conservation need. Next slide. There are some other fish as well. So these are some of the more common fish found throughout eastern Wyoming, and some are found throughout the state. They include creek chub, common carp, fathead minnow, Johnny darter, long-nosed dace, long-nosed sucker, and white sucker. Also, on occasion, you might find a brook trout or a rainbow trout within the Laramie River, but those are in really low abundance. Next slide. So why fish passage? Why are we concerned with that? As Darren's already noted, the current facility at the Dowland diversion blocks upstream fish movement. Fish can't make that jump. And if you saw the photo where you had all the water going through a small defined space, you have higher velocities there and fish can't move up against that flow. So why do fish need to move? Some of the reasons include during the summertime with low flow and warm temperatures, they need to move to seek refuge, so cooler temperatures and better habitats such as pools. For spawning movements, they need to move to find the appropriate habitats to meet their life history needs for spawning. And then winter, oftentimes fish will move to find more stable habitats as well as to avoid predators. Next slide, please. So fish passage at irrigation diversions, as I mentioned, I've worked on several of these types of projects, and it's always irrigation is the primary objective. We want to make sure that the irrigators get the water that they need and that they have a right to. And so fish passage is just secondary. So we like to try to jump on board projects if we know that an irrigation structure is going to be reworked so that we can try to incorporate fish passage, because most structures, if they're the original structures out there, fish passage was never incorporated. So again, irrigation flows take priority, and it's okay if we get fish passage and we don't get fish passage 365 days a year. We know that would be an astronomical cost to ask. So we're just trying to provide fish passage for at least a portion of the year for these species. I think that's it for me, and I'm tossing it to to Justin.
All right, thanks, Christina. Hi, Mayor and Council. My name is Justin Terfair. I work for WWC Engineering here in town, and I've been involved with implementing a lot of these projects across the state and region. A lot of fish passage projects and irrigation diversions. Just a little caveat: I'm not currently under contract with the city. I'm working with Darren and Christina to just kind of help work through the process and think about what opportunities are out there. So with that, I'll just kind of walk through what is fish passage and what's it look like at a few facilities around Wyoming. The first picture you can see here is over on Big Creek, kind of south of Encampment, Wyoming. It's a grouted rock structure on an existing irrigation diversion. Basically, it's a bunch of big rock that was stacked in a nice uniform manner as a ramp below the diversion, and we hold it all together with concrete, and it allows for fish passage. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is another project near Encampment, Wyoming on the Encampment River. It's the Wagner Ditch, and this particular project used a series of rock structures kind of configured in a U or V shape pointing downstream. And those structures hold up the grade of the river so you can push water down the ditch, but they also allow for fish passage. So it's kind of another style of fish passage. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is also on the Encampment River, right near the confluence with the Platte. It's a brand new concrete diversion. You can see the fish ladders on the left-hand side of the photo. Just for scale, that thing's about 100 feet long and maybe 30 feet wide. So it's really a big structure and allows fish passage at this irrigation diversion. Let's go to the next slide. And again, this is a little bit different style. This is a rock ramp that is called a bypass channel because actually the water in the river goes around the diversion. So the top left side of the photo is the irrigation diversion, and the fish can actually swim up the rock ramp, and exit out of this concrete structure kind of at the bottom right-hand side of the photo. So different style of fish passage. Let's go to the next photo or next page. Yeah, so at the downland, there's going to be a lot of options that would get looked at for fish passage, but also, again, the main goal of providing resilient irrigation, improve aquatic resources, and then work with some local, state, and federal partners to get the project done. As Christina mentioned, these projects only happen on irrigation diversions every 40, 50, 100 years, and a lot of partners like to see or would love to see fish passage added to these projects when they get built or rehabbed. Let's go to the next slide. So, as Darren mentioned, the Dallin diversion was identified in a level 1 study by the Water Development Commission. And with that set up the diversion in the city to pursue a level 2 study. And a level 2 study is basically a feasibility and conceptual design study that looks at different design options for the irrigation facility, improving maintenance, safety concerns, but also incorporating fish passage. There's a $1,000 application fee that the city would need to pay for. And the total value of the study is probably between $50,000 and $100,000. After the level 2 study, that generally sets up a project for a level 3 construction project, where the final designs and permitting would occur, as well as construction. Level 3 projects have a 67% grant through WWDC and a 33% loan. And that loan is generally carried by the sponsor, or in this case, the city. Let's go to the next slide. And so I guess to think about this opportunity for the city and bringing in additional funding partners, we put together just a little funding scenario where we assumed the full construction cost of the project was $750,000. Based on kind of other projects we built in the area and around the state, that's a fairly average estimate of what these facilities might cost. So again, the level 2 study would cost the city $1,000. It's a $50,000 to $100,000 study that's completely paid for by WWDC. And then when it moves to that level 3, if we assumed a $750,000 project, 2/3 is automatically paid for by the grant and 1/3 by the loan. So the loan value on $750,000 would be $250,000. Let's go to the next slide. So, looking at a $250,000 loan, bringing in funding partners would be our goal. And the funding partners typically have a hope, or I guess a goal, that the main entity or the irrigators can pay 10% of the overall cost. So in this case, the city would be looking at paying $75,000. And that would leave $175,000 we need to raise from partners. And we identified a bunch of partners that have historically funded projects in the area and region at very similar levels, or actually higher levels. And so let's go to the next slide. So some of the funding partners we identified for this project would be the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust. They'd be our biggest funding partner, and this dollar amount is that for this funding scenario of around $100,000 is really doable. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a fish passage program where they would contribute $35,000 to the project. Game and Fish would look to their own conservation dollars, and Christina can talk more to that. But, you know, Christina felt an ask of $30,000 would be really appropriate. And then the local conservation district, Laramie Rivers Conservation District, they have some funding program that they could also contribute at maybe a $5,000 level. Other partners we could consider bringing into the project would include Trout Unlimited or Ducks Unlimited. I know Darren has recently done a project with Ducks Unlimited on the Goforth Reservoir. Trout Unlimited has been a great partner for projects in the area as far as grant writing and administrative support. And let's go to the next slide. And again, here's that pie chart that just shows in this scenario, what everyone would be paying. So the WWDC grant at 67%, the city of Laramie at that target of 10% or 75,000, and then the remaining funding partners at their respective percentages. Let's go to the next slide. So just a quick timeline on what this might look like if the city decides to move forward with an application. Those are due March 1st. And from there, the level 2 study moves into consultant selection, where hopefully I'll throw my hat in the ring and have a shot at it. But after consultant selection, the funding for that study actually needs to get approved by the legislature in the following spring. So the funding would be approved spring of 22, and the actual level 2 study can be completed in 2022. So although you'd apply now, actual work would not occur until next spring. And then from there, the level 2 study would be completed, and a level 3 project could be initiated as early as fall of 22 or possibly fall of 23. Again, requiring legislative approval the following spring, which leads us ultimately to hopefully construction in the fall of 23 or 24. So starting right now today, it might be a 2 or 3 year project before any dirt gets moved. Let's go to the next slide. That's it. So thank you and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Darren, do you want to cap anything off there, or Mr. Parkin, are we ready to go to council questions?
No, Honorable Mayor, I think that's about it. I will add here at the beginning of this discussion that what I'm looking for this evening is for city manager and the mayor to verbally authorize, in addition to the February 16th council agenda, resolution of support for grant application for this WWDC level 2 study. So I guess that is the ask for tonight. But other than that, I have nothing more to add to this presentation itself, other than, as you mentioned, or as Justin mentioned, a previous experience with many of these funding partners on the Go Forth Reservoir project. I think that was wildly successful. I think that type of work has been kind of the catalyst for things like this. So everybody seems to be very excited, very positive, motivated on this project. We've gotten initial positive reaction from water development as well. So it sure seems like things are lined up really well to pursue this project at this time. I know this has been brought up at various times in the past, but there were kind of roadblocks, problems, funding. But right now, everything sure seems to be clicking together. Also, what's been indicated to me is that water development is not anticipating very many level 2 funding requests this go round. So the chances of this being successful are pretty high. And as Justin mentioned, we need $1,000 application fee for that grant application that is due on March 1st. And for that, I turn it over for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Parkin. About ready to go to the council. I am literally busting at the seams about this project, but I'm very, very interested to hear what other council members have to say. Council Member Schuster, I saw you with a hand up.
Thank you very much. Yes, I approve of everything. Just have one question. We have 3 people using that ditch, so Laramie and then 2 other participants. Will the 2 other participants be contributing anything to better the head gates that also brings them water too?
Councilor Schuster, at this time, we have not factored in any financial contribution from the other 2 users of the ditch. I think the answer to that is to be determined. We're trying to get the framework in place to apply for this application, but those conversations would certainly take place. In the past, the neighbors have contributed. That project that I mentioned where the sheep piling was put in around that diversion structure, I know the Bath Ranch was a partner in that financially and other projects. So as of right now, what was presented to you tonight was very city-centric, but you're right, we would also approach the other users of that ditch as we work through this process.
Thank you, Councilor Schuster. And just quickly, Mr. Park, is it fair to say that as Councilor Schuster outlines, they would stand to receive some positive benefit out of the replacement of this structure as well?
That is correct. Everybody would benefit from the operational improvements of this structure. I mean, the structure works as an irrigation diversion, but it's not easy. It's the neighboring ranches struggle with it just like we do. It's an ongoing maintenance thing. The hazard that it represents is just a big issue to them as it is to us. In fact, it often seems to fall on us to take care of it because they don't want to get out and deal with some of this stuff. So yeah, there's some definite benefit. The fish passage, it kind of depends on where they lie with that, but I'll tell you, at the end of the day, this is primarily an irrigation project too. You know, we're not going to jeopardize our ability to divert water when we need to, even taking the whole river if we need to when we put a call on the river during low flows. You know, when we need to exercise that #1 water right on the river, we will still be able to do that whether there's a fish passage there or not. So yeah, we all stand to benefit.
Thank you for that follow-up, and council members for letting me for letting me ask that follow-up. I've got Councilor Harrington and then Councilor Gabriel lined up. Councilor Harrington?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Schuster took the thought right out of my mind. I had the same question. I'll just then use this little bit of time to express my shared excitement for this project.
Councilor Harrington, I think you mean your extreme enthusiasm for this project.
I am trying to keep it cool. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Gabriel.
Thank you, Mayor. Last summer, Councilor Schuster and Doherty and myself had an opportunity to I guess it was about a 2-hour tour with Darren. And it was really an educational morning, afternoon. And we really appreciate Darren taking us out there. And you can see firsthand what he's talking about here on this rehab project. And I'd also like to thank Justin and Christina for their presentations tonight. Justin, maybe a question for you about the partners. How confident do you think this funding mechanism would be to have the support of all those people that you talked about?
Yeah, thanks, Counselor. I think based on projects we built in the region, those funding sources have been really reliable for the past 5-6 years, at levels even higher than what we presented. And I think they'd be pretty encouraging of this project because it's a true irrigation project that gets fish passage. And that's something a lot of funding partners get excited about. And I think Christina could probably chime in there too.
Yes, Councilor Gabriel, I'm involved in another irrigation diversion project that's utilizing this Wyoming Water Development Commission funding right now that's located within the valley, and we're gathering up our partners. Some partners have already committed funding. So this is a model that's worked really well for projects. And I've already reached out to the Laramie Rivers Conservation District, Trout Unlimited, as well as the Fish and Wildlife Service Partners Program. And everyone's excited about this. So it's on their radar, which is good. We're hitting them up, 2 to 3 years early instead of hitting them up, 6 months before we want excavators out there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gabriel, for those questions. I have a question or two, but I'll wait for others. Councilor Somerville and then Councilor Doherty and then Vice Mayor Pierce. Councilor Somerville, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to take a second to express extreme enthusiasm. Is that the term for this project? I think this would be great for a lot of reasons. But I also just wanted to note we've got a number of our partners as attendees in the room, Mr. Mayor, and I wondered if we had questions about whether they're supportive of the project. Might be an opportunity for public comment at some point.
Oh yeah, no, we're definitely going to make sure we get to it and before too long here. Thank you, Councilor Somerville. Councilor Doherty.
I'm also extremely enthusiastic because I used to work for the Forest Service, and when they were studying movement of fish, and it was incredible how very far trout migrate. Like it was way more than people expected. And so I think to be good citizens, but I also think Laramigos will get behind this. So I'm excited about that. And I'm really excited about the invertebrate community, particularly the ones that don't fly, for them to have an opportunity to travel up and down our Laramie River. So I think it's a win-win-win. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Councilor Doherty. Yeah, this is a council with some scientists and some anglers on it. So this is a little like Christmas timey here for some of us anyway. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, I'll just add my total support. And, there's also the statistics bit of all this. I remember many years ago in a few stats classes counting salmon. So and probabilities related to fish movement. So I think it'd be very cool.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, for those comments. Councilor Cumby, I saw you had a hand up.
I just wanted to also express my enthusiasm, and I think that the slide presentation was very informative. You can see that the structure obviously is time limited, and we're definitely going to have to replace it. And that this presents us with a great opportunity for partnering and for a win-win kind of situation. So thank you very much to those involved in putting this together and putting it forward.
Thank you, Councilor Cumby. I appreciate that. Mr. Parkin, I saw you with a hand there.
Yes, Honorable Mayor, Council, I thought I would throw something in here. This is numbers that Justin had worked up while we were preparing for this evening. And he calculated that putting a fish passage on this structure would open up 9.3 river miles downstream and 17.9 river miles upstream. So 27.2 river miles would be unblocked with this project. So I thought I would throw that out there. We probably should put that in the presentation, but those numbers really kind of put it in perspective, the impact on the river system that the project could have.
Thank you, Mr. Park, and that does seem like an important detail. And I really appreciate those expressions around the Zoom table here and all those questions, because I think there were good ones. You know, I like to tease a little bit. I know that Councilor Harrington and myself are pretty enthusiastic about fishing opportunities, or at least I used to be before I was a member of the Laramie City Council and had no time for it. But I'd like to ask you a question, if I could, Christina, about the potential as a fishery that the Laramie River has. And I know that it's got some pretty good fishing. I've tried my hand at it a little bit myself, but the potential as a fishery that it has, that this might have a beneficial impact on, because that relates to a lot of other things, like folks coming to town to buy fishing licenses, to buy gear, to visit our community. So if you could speak to that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So creating fish passage of this structure, kind of what I mentioned in the project, like why fish need to move. We have areas of the river that can get pretty low during the summer months because of irrigation. So if fish are able to move to better habitats in order to survive those harsh summer months, that's just more trout that we have in the river that are sustaining that fishery. Again, they can also be able to move to spawning habitats. Maybe right now spawning is limited in that section below the Dowland diversion, and they might need to move further upstream to find those spawning habitats. So I think this is just creating a bigger fishscape, I guess you could say, for them that presently do not have.
Thank you very much for that. I recall an article from the Laramie Boomerang a few years back about game and fish assessment of the Laramie River as a fishery, and it was good. And it was right on the cusp of being really good, but they weren't ready to quite give it that level of assessment because there were some things that could be improved. I believe this is probably one of those things. So I appreciate that background. And as Councilor Somerville says, I'm sure that we have guests here that would like to speak to some of these questions or just add something. So I'm going to ask the city clerk to just see who's up. I know we have some folks, because they put something in the question and answer box that they want to speak to here. So city clerk, whoever we have that is waiting first in order.
Mr. Mayor, we have Tony Hoke.
Great. Mr. Hoke, thanks for joining us. You've got the floor. Takes a little second. There he is.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Weaver and Council. As some of you may know, I had an early retirement at the end of December, which is a good thing for me. But I'm on the Monolith Ranch Advisory Committee, and I want to stay involved. So the Conservation District Board said that I could continue to be a sort of a liaison between the Ranch Committee and City and the Conservation District. And I just wanted to state that this has been on the Conservation District's radar since well before Darren. And, you know, I think that I can say with great confidence that the Board of the Conservation District is thrilled about this as well. And they will continue to support this project. And that's it.
That is good news, Mr. Hoke, and thank you for sharing that with us and for your service on the Ranch Committee. I think you're an ideal appointee to that advisory board for the city of Laramie, bring a lot to it. Thank you for sharing that perspective. And I'm sure that the rest of the council would say that they were glad to hear it as well. Appreciate that. Does anybody want to follow up with anything with Mr. Hoke? Councilor Gabriel, I know that you had mentioned a few things, but. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again. Thanks again, Tony. Who else wanted to join us and maybe weigh in here, City Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, I had seen a hand from Parker.
Okay. Go ahead and when you're in the room, just let us know your full name and share your thoughts with us. There you are. You have the floor. They're on the.
Hand is no longer raised, so I'm not sure if he left us or just had his question answered.
Oh darn. Okay. All right. Well, that's how it goes. He's on the screen here, but perhaps they don't want to. The individual doesn't want to share a comment, and that's okay too.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
It looks like we have a Peter.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Legrid. Yes. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Perfect. As a local angler and a part of the Laramie Valley Trout Unlimited, this project is super cool. We support it fully. We want to be in it. Paul, you know this, but yeah, this is just a super exciting thing to be having right in our backyard. So if we can get it going, let's get going. That's all. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Peter. I think it means more coming from you in this particular instance. I do think that the local Trout Unlimited, as well as the state Trout Unlimited organization, is going to be interested in supporting this project. I think that's fair to say. Do we have some other folks that want to join us, City Clerk, or make a comment to us on this one?
Mr. Mayor, that is all the hands raised that I see. Oh, I see one now from Marius Favret.
Okay, and then I see the city manager too. So we'll go to Mr. Favret, and then over to the city manager. Welcome, Mr. Favret, and thank you for joining us.
Eric, can you hear me now? Okay, good. I wanted to support this program based on the experience that we had with the Goforth Ranch, the Goforth pasture rehabilitation. I think Darren's work, and particularly in that instance, Ducks Unlimited, went way beyond, I think, our advisory committee's expectations. Big financial contribution from Ducks Unlimited, but also contribution from obviously the Laramie Rivers Conservation District and from the state. And I think this other project is going to go beyond our expectations. Is what I think is going to happen. So I think the whole advisory committee is going to be pretty excited about it. Thank you.
Thank you, and also thank you for your continued service on that advisory board as well. We appreciate it, and it's good to hear that opinion from members of our advisory group. I'm going to go over to the city manager, who's got a hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I just thought we were about ready to wrap up the item, and I was going to close it out if there are no more questions.
I don't see anybody, and I don't know if we had anybody else that wanted to weigh in. I think the city clerk got everyone for us, but we'll just check one last time. And I'll quickly just say this before we move on. Mr. Park, and I've been, along with others, bugging you about trying to find some opportunities to improve fishing habitat through the city's ownership of the Monolith Ranch for some time. And I can't think of a better project that achieves a number of things for the city of Laramie, including an outdoor recreation opportunity for people, which helps our local economics. This is great. All right. Enough of me glowing about this. Thank you. City Manager, over to you.
Thanks. Mayor, I'll just close it out by saying we'll have this on the agenda for you in a few weeks here. The resolution to submit the application, as I said, and committing the $1,000, which is minor, of course, in the scope of everything. I also wanted to mention that our 10% contribution is something that I foresee not being problematic. It would come out of your Monolith Ranch budget cost center, which is within the water fund, but foreseeing no impact to rate or anything like that that might be concerning for folks. And certainly the return on our $75,000 local investment is huge. So really pleased to hear that you all like this project. I love it too. And Darren, to you, I guess it was not harebrained after all.
Couldn't agree more with that one. And yeah, I think, I think I heard from all the city council members a positive for putting this on for the official council action when the time comes, and I see the nods around. So we'll deal with it as an agenda item on the next voting agenda. And thanks everybody that came for this topic and presentation and to add comment. We do appreciate it. So we'll close out that work session item and get into the final few things on our work session, folks. Brings us to the item number five, City Council updates and council comments. And I will just go ahead and wait for anybody to put a hand up that wants to talk to us about it. I think we might have a few because a few significant things have happened lately, but I'll open it up for volunteers. Councilor Schuster, thank you very much.
Yes, Historical Railroad Depot has been contacted by the Albany County Department of Health, and they may be using the depot because we have large enough open square areas for COVID vaccination. So that's in the consideration down there, and it looks positive, but no final decision on that yet. Trying to think, I updated 2 weeks ago on Wyoming Territorial Park. They have an exciting summer coming up, but haven't had the next meeting yet. So that's all my updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. That's a big deal. Let us know when you have more info about that, but that's good. That's great to hear about. All right. Other council updates from folks? Councilor Gabriel, we'll go to you, and then we'll go to Councilor Harrington. Councilor Gabriel, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Schuster and I interviewed two outstanding candidates yesterday for the Tree, Parks, and Rec Board. And the recommendation will be on an upcoming agenda, but we had two really great candidates. And I just wanted to pass that along. Rec Board meeting tomorrow night, which I won't be able to make because of our special meeting. And that is all of the update I have.
Thank you, Councilor Gabriel, and sorry about hitting your schedule with a bunch of things, but we'll get back to normal here. Appreciate that update, and I suppose we'll be seeing those names on our agenda, our consent agenda. Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I wanted to just mention quickly, the Laramie Public Art Coalition is reaching out to the Park, Trees, and Rec Board about a cooperative plan to put small murals on those like sort of electric boxes around town in cooperation with Rocky Mountain Power. Likely not to come to us, at least not for some time, but just so you all know, if you see something like that, be good to take shape. And then a reminder that the first sculpture for the Snowy Range Bridge sculpture pads will be installed mid-March, so keep an eye out for that. And then I just wanted to thank Councilor Somerville and Pierce for attending the Planning Commission for me for the last several weeks. Very much appreciated as I sort of navigate a newborn.
Seems like a reasonable accommodation, and I appreciate members' willingness to work with each other to do things like that. It's good. It's a good way to be. It's a good way to go. Teamwork. Anybody else want to? Hey, Councilor O'Doherty, and then we'll go to Councilor Stalder, and then we'll go to the Vice Mayor. Councilor O'Doherty.
The Environmental Advisory Committee met, and they had a really long agenda. Looks a lot, as dense as ours. But some of the things they talked about was they the city of Salisbury, Maryland is using our recommendations for emissions reduction. They borrowed from that to create emissions reductions plan. Also, we talked about the rail tie wind project. Paul Montoya gave a presentation, and Kate Wolf from the Natural Resources Program and Kara Kessler gave a report about the mobile monitoring that I think might have been Councillor Somerville's baby back in the day. And so they had some reports about that, and then the advisory committee was in favor of putting a mobile station up in the northwest part of town near the truck stops. And then we had an update from about the geophysical study about the water coming down the mountain, and that was pretty exciting. And then we also had an update about net metering. It was a really full agenda, but there's presentations on the website if anybody wants to follow. Oh, also the landfill. We talked about recycling, and there's a subcommittee that's working on how to keep stuff out of the landfill. One of the things they decided was the best thing they could do is try to get people to know what goes in the recycling can. So they're going to work on that publicity. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilor Doherty. Sounds like folks have been busy with their boards and advisory boards and commissions, and I appreciate these updates. I think I had Councilor Stelter up next. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. The new airport terminal is open. They've been having flights out of there since February 3rd. It's an incredible facility. If you guys want to check it out, let me know. You know, if you want to tag along to the next airport board meeting, or I'd be happy to get you guys in there if we don't have a flight somewhere exciting soon. It's a pretty incredible facility.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's it, but that's a big deal, and I think probably a lot of people saw the article in the paper, which gave a good overview, and be getting out there sometime soon because I'm interested to see it. It looks pretty impressive. I think people are glad to see it happen, and it's a benefit to our community. Vice Mayor, I think you were up next.
Hey, thank you. And about that planning commission, I think all these years on council, that may have only been my second or third attendance at a planning commission meeting. So it was a good reminder to see what happens there. They received a training on nuisance abatement. They also got schooled on Robert's Rules of Order, which was interesting. And they worked on one variance for that airport having to do with putting up some really nice and new signage so folks can see their way into the airport, and that was passed. So that was great. And that's it for me. Thanks.
No, that's great. Thanks, Vice Mayor. Yeah, some pretty timely and strong updates from the crew this week. Anybody else? Councilor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick update. Received communication from the downtown board, just that they wanted to let the council know they don't know how many people will be able to make it tomorrow night for the special meeting for the first reading on the downtown design guidelines, but hope to bring everybody for second reading. So just as an FYI, if there's not a lot of downtown people there tomorrow. And the other things I have are just comments, so I can wait on those.
Okay. Appreciate that. We made it around with everyone that had an update to share this week. Okay. I wonder if the council allowed, I'll just give you a quick update on the county city working groups. I received an email from Commissioner Gosar asking if we were ready to go on that. And we are, but we have not yet actually voted on that item officially. We were going to last week, but we didn't quite get to it. Without any objection from any of the council members, I'd like to communicate back with him and say, yes, let's start working on dates and times, and we'll have an official action on it the following week. If nobody has any trouble with that, I'd like to communicate that with him, but I wanted to check with everyone else first, make sure they were okay with that. And those committees that were settled on were the three that we talked about, and I think you all know where you're at on those for the most part. And if you were okay with it and didn't let me know otherwise, I just kept you there. So I think we're ready to go on that. So if nobody has any concerns, then I'd like to let him know, yeah, let's get the two staff groups working together to try to figure out who needs to be where and when and the rest of the scheduling. Is that good? Okay. All right. Appreciate it. And all of those updates. So let's keep rolling. And we'll just go to comments for whoever has one right off the bat. I know Councilor Somerville said she did, but anybody else? Councilor Somerville, we'll go ahead and go to you first.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just two quick things. First, a comment, Councilor Doherty, on the recycling education program. I don't know how it works in anybody else's house with kids, but my kids are better at it than I am. At education directed at school kids, they're very good. They are the recyclers at my house. They're in charge of sorting and taking it out in the whole 9 yards. So I just wanted to add that. And then the other comment I had is I received a phone call this morning, actually, requesting a speed limit be moved farther outside, just outside the city limits, where Snowy Range becomes Highway 230. Apparently, speeding in that area has continued to increase, becoming an issue. And last night, apparently a car came around and turned onto the dirt road right there as you come into the city limits pretty fast, threw up a bunch of rocks and got somebody walking their dog. So I know that that's a YDOT street, and that's more conversation along with that, but I think the 30-mile-an-hour sign is posted 2 blocks into the city limits on that. So I would just let you know that I received that call and that request.
All right, Councilor Somerville. I think that'll be on the radar for people. In fact, it is already, because I see the city manager would like to speak. Go ahead, city manager.
Mayor, duly noted comment, and we will correspond with YDOT and look into the situation there. Thank you.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. And thanks for that information, Councilor Somerville. I know exactly where you're talking about it, and I can see how it would have happened. Other council comment? Vice Mayor?
You know, I'm wondering, Mayor, if we might not want to do a little public service announcement related to our meeting tomorrow, and some of our movements. I don't know if the city clerk, I don't know if you or our city manager want to kind of take the lead on that. I hate to put people on the spot, but I think maybe a short discussion about that might be okay.
No, I think it's definitely in order, and thank you for taking the lead on bringing it up, Vice Mayor. That's right. Have folks seen on the council the emails and follow-up emails to kind of straighten some of that out? I know I emailed the council with some discussion about a need to get some of these complicated topics onto an agenda where they could have what I believe to be a sufficient amount of time and not be mixed up with some of the other topics that also need a lot of time on our agendas over the course of the next couple of weeks. Talked to a few people about it, and everyone seemed to be okay with it. Councilor Stalder, it was good to see your email inquiring about it so we could get the issue about postponing to a date certain straightened out with how we were going to address it on our special meeting agenda, as well as on the calendar that we'd already put it on. So for tomorrow, there's going to be some discussion and probably fairly in-depth consideration of some things we might do with the first topic on the agenda, but we won't vote on amendments until the next Tuesday. But we'll be able to hash things out and allow people to provide input, make comments, ask questions, and hopefully address those comments and questions, and then be able to consider our own thinking around amendments and what direction we might want to go. voting on anything will take place on that item the next Tuesday. The other item will receive an introduction and in-depth exploration, question and answer, and first reading from the council. Vice Mayor, is that kind of what you had in mind by way of addressing some of that? I hope I did it in a way that made sense. Anybody else want to ask any questions or add anything to that? Councilor Somerville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question that I got from the downtown group, and I wasn't here when this happened. So I was asked if the design guidelines were postponed to a date specific. I saw the notation for the earlier item for item number 1, but not item number 2. Do we need to do that for item number 2 as well to reconsider the postponement to the date certain of February 16th?
I'm not, Councilor Somerville, I'm not sure about that because I think we're looking at a first reading on that item tomorrow. So I think we're good to go there, but the city clerk is here to help us with all those details. Am I right, city clerk?
Yeah, Mayor and Councilor Somerville, this is the first reading of this ordinance, so we haven't actually had this on the agenda to this point. So that's why we'll proceed as normal with this one. We don't have to take it off, do a motion to reconsider to bring it on the floor.
Thank you very much, City Clerk and Councilor Somerville. I think it's good to probably get these things ironed out. And if you look at the agenda as posted for both ourselves and the public, that follows along. And for those members of the public that might have been wondering about an item that we did postpone to a date certain, hopefully it comes across that we're going to have some discussion or receive public comments on that ordinance. And the discussion may well be detailed, but we won't go to any votes since we have already put it on for an action date later on. I think that's important. And city staff and council members were good to catch it right away, which you all did. Appreciate the reminder on that, Vice Mayor. What else do we have by way of comments from people? I've got one or two, but I always want to give everybody else an opportunity. Okay. Well, thanks for putting up with my enthusiasm about this fish passage project this evening, folks. I think it's a great project, and I think it's even better because we'll probably be able to leverage some donor funding and grants. I would anticipate that there may be some interest as we discussed tonight with some of those organizations, and that it could be that the city's percentage of that may change. We'll have to wait and see what folks are going to be able to do. Sounds like it really is one of those rare birds or unicorns, if you want to call it that, kind of a win-win, both in terms of our irrigation needs and some other things that are going to come with it. So it's pretty good project. Really glad to see it. I wanted to check with the council. I have been asked by an organization if I would be willing to sign on as a mayor from a city that has made a carbon neutrality commitment, if I would be willing to sign on to a public statement to the White House that I am mayor from a city that has made a carbon neutrality goal, and our city has set one, just to pass that information along. If there isn't any concern with that, I'll go ahead and do that. But as I've said to you all before, I'm unlikely to do any of those things without checking with you folks first. I can give you more details about it if you'd like right now. It's really just a mayoral sign-on letter that they're asking. They're trying to get as many elected officials at the local level as possible to pass that along and just share that it's something local governments across the country are wanting to see things happen with. So if there isn't any objection, I'll go ahead and sign that. If you want more information before I do that, I'll sure get it to you. Doesn't seem like anybody's too worried about it. Councilor Cumby.
Thank you for doing that. I think that's a good thing to put that forward.
Okay. I appreciate that. so if everyone's okay with it, I'll go ahead and supply that. And when I do that, I will get you all and send you all in a council email the exact organization. As you might imagine, it's an organization that's supporting efforts to push for carbon neutrality. But I'll get you more information about it. That was it for comments from me. And I think if we go right into the rest of this, we'll get out of here at a reasonable time tonight, folks, which I bet meets with your approval. We need to do the agenda review for the February 16th meeting. City Clerk, do we need to do a just kind of a pro forma agenda review for tomorrow night as well?
You certainly can, Mayor. Although the agenda's already been published to the public, so we can't really make changes at this point. But
right,
you could certainly do a short address of it.
Yeah, and
you've kind of already.
Right. Thank you, City Clerk. You're right. We kind of already did. I just didn't know if there was any need to do that. We have essentially done that. There wasn't going to be any changes to that because it was only going to be those specific items. So we'll consider that done. And let's get right into the February 16th agenda for any questions people may have. I'm looking at it myself for just a second, so I may not see on the screen, but I'll be right back. Okay, somebody have a question for the consent agenda items? Oh, I'm going to go to the City Clerk, Councilor Harrington, real quick because I saw her. City Clerk, did you?
Mr. Mayor, Darren Parkin had mentioned a resolution. I'm not sure between you and City Manager if you wanted it on the 16th or if you wanted that to go on the February 24th meeting, special meeting, in order to get it done before the March 1st deadline.
Thank you, City Clerk. And I think I heard the City Manager tell us that she would get something together for the 16th meeting, but that's a really good question. We should check back with the City Manager.
I do believe, Mayor, this is Janine, that it will probably not be on the 16th. We'll have it at your first meeting in March.
Okay, and that still fits in with the timeline that we need, I think, from what I heard before, because the deadline on it was...
The submission deadline is March 1. We may be able to delay, submit the resolution as an attachment to the application the day after. So we're looking into that.
Okay. Would there be any benefit to getting it on that meeting for the 24th?
It certainly wouldn't hurt. The question is whether we have adequate staff bandwidth to have it prepared in time. So it's not so much your schedule, it's ours at this point, but we'll make sure that no matter which date it is, it doesn't disadvantage our application.
Right, it doesn't die on the vine. How about this? How about we put that item on the 24th if it's ready, and if it's not, we'll just do it at the next meeting after that. Well, actually, no, we better not do that because the City Clerk's not going to want to put something on there that we don't consider. So we'll just plan on doing it in the first meeting. Councilor Schuster?
No, I had nothing. Whenever we can get it on there, I'm happy with. I'd love it if we could get it next Tuesday, but I know that staff just doesn't have enough time. So I will, no.
Sure. I think we all feel the same way. I'm right there with you. And I also understand that our staff people have plenty going on. So whenever it's ready, we'll get it on there and we'll deal with it then. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I think this is such a good thing. We're all just excited to get it passed and get it going. So.
Yep. But I also think the city manager is probably capable of making that assessment that, if we have to add it as an attachment afterwards, then, so be it. We can still get things done the way they need to be. Councilor Harrington, did I see you with a hand?
Mr. Mayor, I have something about the consent agenda. So if you're not there yet.
No, we're there. You took us there. Let's do it.
Great. So I just wanted to say 9F, I had expressed interest in WAM planning last week. My name's not on this list. I am not offended by that at all. If you need any help, certainly I'm here to help. So just ask. And I don't mind not being included on one more meeting.
Councilor Harrington, unfortunately for you, I think that's just an oversight.
Great.
Does anyone on the city clerk? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to address the reason why Councilor Harrington's not listed, is that he had previously served on that committee. And so we didn't, since you haven't resigned or left council, we just left you on there, assumed you were continuing. So my apologies for, it came across that we were forgetting you.
I was not offended at all, City Clerk. I will see you all at the meetings.
He is a public servant, elected official, folks. Councilor Harrington. No, yeah. So you're still on that committee, councilman, and we'll be looking forward to your contributions. I'd like to ask the council if they have any objection to that being on the consent agenda, since we had already discussed it, and we're just trying to not have a lot of things on the regular agenda, so we have plenty of time to get to heavier topics. Is everyone okay with that? I didn't think it was going to have a lot of discussion, so we might as well save ourselves the individual vote time. Everyone all right? Councilor Gabriel? All right. Thanks. Thanks, folks. Any other questions on the consent agenda? Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Councilor Somerville.
Just a quick question. The adoption of the goals, will that include the committee assignments that we need to approve?
It would, and that's probably, yeah, it would indeed, and that's probably another one to talk about. Putting on the consent agenda. I'm glad you brought it up. We've had a full retreat on this. We've had discussion and an opportunity for public input. We did talk about in the agenda review if we wanted to leave that on our regular agenda, or if the council might be willing to place it on the consent agenda and just vote on it that way. Love to know if everyone's okay with that, just to keep that regular agenda as clean as we can. Okay. Appreciate that very much, councilors. All right. Anything else on that before we get into the regular agenda? Okay. Let's get into questions about regular agenda items then, or comments, or whatever you might have. I think it's going to be pretty straightforward. We're getting after things that we need to because they've been a little bit delayed, and we're going to get through that fire code issue. Need to get that done. Capital construction grants. We need to make sure that we get this rec board issue handled. I'm sure we will. Then we'll get into what will probably be another substantial discussion, though maybe not as substantial as the previous two, around original ordinance number 2017, and then original ordinance number 21. And we're going to have an executive session that night. I think first half of that regular agenda should go pretty quickly, so we'll have adequate time to talk about those two items and then have an executive session before 1:30 in the morning. But we'll see about public comment. Everybody satisfied and okay? Anybody feel like we're once again being naive about our ability to get through this agenda? Councilor Gabriel, thumbs up. I don't know if that was for the first part or for the naivete question. I think we'll be able to do it because I think a lot of this has been addressed. And so we may not have quite the same amount of discussion. I want to thank the Boomerang for getting a clarification article out there that I think helped address some of this. We were critical of them last time, and fairly so, I think, but I was glad to see they followed up. I want to thank Councilor Gabriel for having some conversations around that. He shared with me that he was prepared to put a guest opinion piece together for that, but after speaking to folks, there really wasn't a need because they put that other clarifying article. And other council members have been pretty good about, I think, fielding phone calls, answering emails about the questions, and that's the kind of thing we need to do. I had a few return phone calls myself to folks that said, oh, I called you and I left you a message, and then after I watched the meeting and read the other article in the Boomerang, I don't have the same concerns that I did before, and maybe that's been a an experience for all of us. Okay. Well, let's have me shut the heck up and close this work session then, unless there's anything else. Councilor Gabriel.
Just one final thing on the boomerang. I wish to express my appreciation for their clarification on how to address council, how the Zoom meetings work. That was a piece before the article on the general contractors ordinance, and they went through the whole scenario. I thought that it was very good for the public to see how everything operates now in our Zoom world. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Councilor Gabriel, for remembering that shout out. Important. And, you know, we do support our local newspaper. Sometimes, you know, we're at odds with them on a thing or two here and there, but in general, we support the Boomerang. But I very much appreciate that last comment. That was a good article for them to put together, because people are confused and they don't know where to find the code of conduct and they don't know where to figure things out. And I think it was a good and informative article. Okay. Second time around for the mayor shutting the heck up and closing this work session. Any last comments from anybody else? City Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to comment that you have one final public comment period.
Very good. Let's go to the final public comment period. Anybody there?
I see no hands raised, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Well, it's 2 minutes after 8. Let's wrap it up and close this work session. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone. Stay warm.
Yep. See you.